Ladies and gentlemen, after roughly 24 hours of playing Homeworld free, I'm now ready to share my unfiltered thoughts on the game. This is not sponsored content, of course, unlike most coverage of the game out there. That in itself is a problem. Where is the organic coverage? Are people that underwhelmed? Steam user review ratings certainly point in that direction, sitting at a disastrous 41% positive at the time of writing. I also want to quickly mention that I was a fig backer of the game and have been a huge fan of the originals. I also did Homeworld 2 modding for several years, which ultimately landed me in the game industry. So the series sure means a lot to me. Anyway, I will discuss core gameplay first and leave spoilery stuff for later. In terms of factions, Blackbird Interactive seems to have taken an approach where they sort of mixed and matched previously existing concepts into the fleet, with just a few exceptions. All ships for both factions are unlocked by progressing down a very linear tech tree, forcing strikecraft in the early game, then moving into corvettes, then frigates, and so on. Looking at the Hygarans, we've got recons, interceptors, bombers, and that's it for strikecraft. That's just Homeworld 2's roster, nothing new. Their upgrades offer something slightly fresh at least. Scouts are decent against strikecraft and can unlock an ability that speeds them up for a period of time at the cost of reduced damage output. Interceptors are anti-strikecraft vessels and can gain damage at the cost of reducing armor while active. Bombers are good against larger ships and can gain a cloak ability that slows them down while active. Firing their weapon reveals them. Strikecraft are also the only group of vessels that have global upgrades, which increase their health. I think these three abilities are okay, but what is the deal with the global upgrades? If health upgrades exist, why not damage ones? Why do only strikecraft get this? For corvettes, you better brace yourself because there is only one single vessel, the railgun corvette, which is good against larger or static targets. That's it, nothing else in the roster for this class. Their upgrade gives them a triple shot ability. It feels satisfying and requires targeting, but is in effect non-transformative. Frigates have a bit more to offer in terms of diversity. The assault frigate, ion cannon frigate, torpedo frigate, and support frigate are all familiar faces, while the suppression frigate is essentially a new take on Homeworld 2's flag frigate. The assault frigate excels against smaller craft and gets an ability improving armor but reducing speed. Ion frigates excel against larger targets and have an ability to overcharge their weapon. Torpedo frigates offer long-range bombardment and can reliably hit corvettes and larger targets. Their ability increases their range in exchange for a drastic cut to their speed. The suppression frigate is another anti-strikecraft ship with the ability to deliver a burst shot. The usual capital ships also return in the form of the carrier, destroyer, and battlecruiser. The carrier builds smaller ships and also has an ability to temporarily build faster in exchange for disabling its defense guns. Destroyers can take on anything and have an ability to launch a bunch of missiles without downsides as a rare exception. Battlecruisers are also an all-rounder and also the biggest ship you can build. They have an ability to boost the damage of nearby ships while disabling their own weapons. Before I go over the Incarnate faction, I'll quickly point out that these abilities are rather basic. By this I mean that very few of these actually change how you use the unit. You're still going to use your ion cannons to focus fire on tough targets. You just got to target something that isn't going to be overkilled so as to not waste some of that damage. Exactly the same thing with the railgun corvettes. Bomber cloaking, however, is cool. You can get some really nasty raids done with those, and the receiving end would need some defenses nearby. If they don't, you can do huge amount of damage to their mining operations. With every single ship having abilities and the typical payoff being greater than the downside, you got a lot of ability activation to do. I mean that quite literally. More often than not, what you're supposed to do is cycle through your units and activate the ability, with just some outliers requiring thought and situational awareness. At this point, I would raise the question of why we need these abilities at all. The performance impact could be built into the core units. As for the Incarnate faction, I have chosen not to cover their faction in as much detail. Mind you, you can only play as them in skirmish, meaning that they are not available in the Wargames co-op mode. Plus, their fleet is simply too similar to the Hygaran one to really care about it. They combine the free Hygaran strikecraft into a single multi-role fighter. So basically they flip the underrepresentation with smaller ships by offering more corvettes to Higarans. The assault corvette is good against smaller craft, while the plasma corvette is basically a chunky bomber. They also have a disruption corvette, which nerfs the target ship's speed and damage. They have a dedicated capture corvette for stealing enemy ships, much like the Homeworld 1 salvage corvette. Their attack and multi-beam and smart missile frigates are essentially the same as the Higaran assault and ion cannon and missile frigates. Really disappointing. Their missile frigate is essentially a missile-based version of the suppression frigate. Carrier, destroyer, battle cruiser, anti-strike craft, and anti-capital turrets. Nothing exciting here in terms of faction design other than the visuals, of course. The Incarnate Mothership, unlike the Higaran one, cannot gather resources. This gives a huge economic advantage to the Higaran fleet and is most certainly not offset by the slightly higher health of the Incarnate one. In a skirmish match, you have enough income to constantly produce ships of all types until you have multiple frigate options unlocked. With the Higarans quickly being able to unlock interceptors and bombers and gathering more resources early on, they will simply outspam the dominance fighters and take them on with a mix of recons and interceptors, while cloaked bombers go to town on the Incarnate resourcing operations. Given this superior starting point, Incarnate corvettes, which will be more numerous in terms of production at least, will simply get outnumbered by the Higaran strike craft that can from here on control the flow of the game. With the frigate situation being about equal, the Higarans get further ahead given their superior income. Most 1v1 skirmish games will not feature destroyers and above, as the maps are simply too small. Terrain doesn't do much in practice, but can result in a ton of platforms. 3v3 team games have a good chance of bringing the bigger ships to the table. Unfortunately, destroyers aren't very good though. For whatever reason, Blackbird made them able to take on anything, but only in low numbers. It would be much better to go the way of the old games, making them vulnerable to strike craft, but very powerful in terms of taking out frigates and capital ships. As is, they're just here for taking damage. Battle cruisers have the same problem, though in their case the situation is much worse for the Higaran one. It has one of the ion cannons in a depressed socket, so you cannot shoot at low angles. Who would place a direct line of sight weapon in a depression on the hull? Absolutely awful design there that gets in the way of functionality. Though even when it does fire, the firepower is underwhelming. You also can't capture battle cruisers, which was pretty disappointing, especially in the campaign. In conclusion, due to the unit rosters in combination with the high income economy and a linear tech tree, your skirmish games will be sadly defined by mindless spam, and ultimately victory will come down to your RTS fundamentals. Whoever can juggle the basic tasks of production, fleet movement, and micromanagement best wins. There is very little strategy or build order differentiation to speak of, as you are forced down the spammy early stages and don't make choices, but rather just buy everything on offer simultaneously once you have made your resource collectors. Moving on to tactics, there aren't any. I mean that in terms of the unit behavior feature that Homeworld 1 was so great with. You could tell your ships to prioritize firepower or evasion or be neutral. This was especially huge for Strikecraft, which would literally wiggle to try and dodge incoming fire while assigned evasive tactics. This is just not present in Homeworld 3. To a degree, the game does offer ballistics in the projectile system. You can use cover via asteroids and other terrain features, but the unit tactics in this game essentially just drive AI behavior, defining how much they would react to enemies. And it's not very good at that. The default neutral setting would have freshly undocked or built ships simply not engage the enemy while there is serious combat going on around them. You will just have to manually watch out for this and give orders to your parading fleet. Not good. Formations are also really strange. Sure, the ships will move into formation no problem, until there is combat. Once in combat, most formations totally fall apart, even with capital ships spinning end over end for no clear reason. Seriously, I just want my front-facing guns to face the enemy. Is that too much to ask for? Why the hell is an ion cannon frigate rotating? Just point and shoot, damn it. For Strikecraft, what I would recommend is that you set them to sphere formation. This will make them hyper efficient at taking on other Strikecraft, as they will fire their weapons nearly constantly. Meanwhile, most other formations will have them do strafing runs, which means they fly around and every now and then they get to shoot. Not good. When it comes to directional armor, the game apparently has it. so flanking from any direction is supposed to be pretty good. However, three-dimensional combat doesn't quite work. When you have a superior vantage point and issue an attack order, your ships will literally surrender their position and go down the z-axis to meet the enemy face to face. Not good. Hyperspace jumps, subsystems, and targetable weapons or engines, as well as physical collision, are completely gone as well. I think Homeworld 3 is worse for it. Certainly much of this should be fixable, but I'm not reviewing future possible patches. This is at the moment the product. Moving on to the campaign, there's a huge change to immediately notice. The cinematics are very character focused, fully animated 3D sequences, much unlike the animatics of old. Although this is not a problem in and of itself, it's critical to understand that Homeworld never was a character-focused environment. It always was about the fate of an entire people, with the characters providing context, with a minimal amount of emotional self-expression. Professionals under stress, essentially. The quality of the cinematics themselves is high in most places, but there are wonky moments that don't look very clean. Whether that's a filter or AI interpolation trying to increase the frame rate by filling in, it's hard to say. The main character, Imogen, gets a majority of the focus. We don't actually learn much about her directly, but rather about her struggle with taking the role of fleet command and try to live up to Karen Sajet, who has become a near mythical figure to the Hagaran people. As Imogen gets accustomed to her new role, she gets advice from the intelligence officer, who has a really unclear role and repeatedly questions Imogen's decisions. Their interactions feel like they are on an evenish playing field with no obvious power structure. Ultimately, he doesn't end up adding much to the story and serves as an information delivery vehicle most of the time. The antagonist, the Incarnate Queen, frequently visits Imogen in her hyperspace-induced visions, trying to win her over to her side. It's obviously not going to happen given the Incarnate have destroyed entire worlds, and the Hagarans don't look kindly on terrorist factions. And yet, the cinematics especially give this form of interaction a lot of time, ultimately acting as nothing but filler. Midway through the campaign, Imogen gets to reunite with Karen Sajet, who has been feared dead for years. Her running from the Incarnate was about asset denial. The original progenitor hyperspace cores are what the Incarnate Queen is after, as these would allow dominion over the galactic network and also give easy access to long distance jumps. Imogen and Karen's combined fleet takes on the Queen's, but rather than trying to win conventionally, they hand over the cores, take control of the Queen's gigaship with space magic to hyperspace it into oblivion, and finally show her kindness and the power of friendship, with Karen sacrificing herself to take the Queen with her. I'm not making this up. What the actual hell? At least many of the actual missions are kind of good, if you can look past the previously mentioned issues with ship behaviors. I particularly enjoyed the wave defense mission by the hyperspace gate, where you had to fortify a choke point to defend against the Incarnate. The combined use of a large fleet, deployed turrets and mine-laying frigates, which sadly aren't a part of skirmish games, made this a very fun experience. The only issue was performance with the bigger waves. Generally speaking, the largest campaign fleets had me down to 20 FPS, and I'm running a 5800X 3D and an RTX 4080, so work definitely needs to be done to improve optimization. That said, most missions ran fine. Several of the missions offer interesting terrain, including enormous shipwrecks that you can use as tunnels or massive ice shelves that you could fly into. The staple asteroid field mission also gets included, though isn't particularly fun, with ships having a mind of their own in terms of how they should move. One way to deal with this is to use the mothership as a shield in vertical mode and hire your fleet behind it while repairing the mothership as it takes hits. Overall, I find the terrain to be overhyped by the devs. It certainly plays a role, but it takes away much of what 3D space is supposed to be about. They sacrifice the vastness aspect and continue in these super artificial feeling environments to force a certain gameplay flow, but ultimately don't make too much use of verticality if we're looking closely. Though there is this exception where you go after the Incarnate shipyard structure. This place offers a pretty good balance between structures and verticality. Mission objectives are relatively varied, but perhaps the most interesting one being a suicide round mission with Strikecraft only. Well, the shipyard mission should be in theory the most interesting one in terms of player choices, as you have so many objectives to take out. Unfortunately, each target you take out will hyperspace in additional enemies, so rushing the main objective is a no-go on the hard difficulty. I had to take out the existing defenses, including the carrier groups first, before going after the structures. Otherwise, I would get overwhelmed by the scripted reinforcements. With my approach, the enemy would pump destroyers non-stop, however, I simply captured them one at a time until I built up a ridiculous fleet of a dozen of them. It was easy from here on to finish up. Regarding capturing and ending missions, the two don't go well together in Homeworld 3. I would often have tons of resources and salvage left over, and sometimes even have a destroyer capture in progress, but the mission would end the moment I completed the objectives. Bye bye, no destroyers for you. Should have waited with the objectives. The other Homeworld games handle this so much better with the player-initiated end of mission. I mean, if you don't have much of a fleet left, surely you need a moment to rebuild, no? I'm overall feeling pretty mixed about the campaign. It has its moments, but the characters are not relatable, the conflict at hand gets moved into the background in favor of the personal focus, and in particular the Incarnate Queen is a raging anime villain that I just can't take seriously. Blackbird built a superior product in Deserts of Karak, which had more nuance and mystery to it, despite the eventual outcome being a known quantity. I'm very confused as to how this could have happened. Next up, there is also the Wargames mode to talk about. You are supposed to play this as a group of 3 players, where you will have a single Hagaran carrier each, plus a small starting fleet. This is a roguelike mode, where you move from map to map with the persistent fleet system that Homeworld is so well known for. In each map, you get some randomly generated mission objectives from a common pool. Eventually you will see the same ones, of course. As you progress, you will unlock artifacts which give you mutually exclusive upgrade choices for your fleet. The buffs themselves are pretty major, but typically only change stats. There are a bunch that unlock new types of ships though, which is very cool. The longer you spend in each map, the more overwhelmed you will be by enemy waves. Seeing as there are not many resources to gather, it's best to get the job done quickly and move on. Unfortunately, being stuck with a carrier means that you will never have other capital ships, which is truly a shame. I personally have very little desire in playing with a persistent fleet that can only field spammable, forgettable ships that I have little attachment to. Capital ships take a lot of effort to field, and so holding on to them is critical. That said, the mode might work for others. I certainly have seen a good number of lobbies for war games and much less for skirmish. Just keep in mind that you absolutely can't play this game mode alone. You'll be overwhelmed and it will be no fun at all. Controls are one topic that the game has much improved on since the beta, and I had very little issues playing with the classic controls. You have a lot of options to rebind different actions, and if you prefer the modern controls, you can go for it. I do find WASD to be awfully inefficient in RTS games, but it's a lifeline for so many that don't play this genre very often. I don't think Homeworld 3 is the kind of game that actively requires this kind of input method though, with the exception of navigating the tunnels. One thing I had a huge problem with is the middle mouse button though, as it focuses your camera on your selection. So you can't use your mouse drag to scroll as you get snapped back. A huge oversight for sure. Combine this with the fact that there is no option to lock the mouse to the game window. As a multi-monitor user, I cannot edge scroll with my mouse now. So I am forced to use the drag scroll method, which then snaps me back to my units. Super annoying. For multiplayer, I also have some huge complaints. First off, lobbies don't work most of the time, giving errors upon joining. There is an auto match option, but I'm not sure what the point is, as it's not connected to a leaderboard, so it's just lobbies with extra steps. I would like there to be ranked matchmaking personally, but if that won't happen, there is no point in having this. Looking at default settings, it also seems to region lock players entering into matchmaking, and with a tiny multiplayer population, that makes awfully little sense. Matchmaking should loosen its restrictions the longer it takes to find players, whether we are looking at a rating or ping range. There also is no live spectating for multiplayer matches, and the replay mode is so basic that you can't even tell who is playing and what side they are on. Everyone gets a neutral color and you have no access to any UI, so you don't know how many resources each side has or what they're currently building. You can only watch the fireworks, but good luck in taking that in without team colors on the overlays. Combined with the weak strategic aspects of the core gameplay, if something isn't done here, multiplayer is doomed already. I hope Blackbird will do something about it, as I would love to cover some matches, but not like this. To go on a positive note though, I wanted to send my compliments to the art and sound team. The game's environments, space backgrounds, lighting, and ship models are awesome. And while there's not supposed to be any sound in space, I think the chunky gunfire, swooshing missile launches, and whooshing beam weapons make everything better. I do find the ship designs to be a bit too similar, especially within the frigate and capital classes, but they are still visually pleasing. The motherships, of course, taking the spotlight without a doubt. The music itself was nostalgic too, and while not revolutionary, it definitely is fitting, with iterations of many of the classic motifs making a return. 10 out of 10 would get copyright striked for Adagio for strings again. In the end, Blackbird still has a 1-year roadmap to deliver on, and with some hard work, I do think much of the issues can be addressed. I just unfortunately have now to believe that we have witnessed the end of the Homeworld franchise. But what do you think? Please let me know in the comments. What are your top issues with the game, and what are the things that you like the most? Make sure to like and subscribe on your way out if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.